Hello and welcome to another episode of Mind to Mind. And my name is Evelyn Njeri from Kenya, Nairobi, Kenya.
I'm Dan Claiborne. I'm a psychologist from the United States, in Kansas, in the very middle of the United States. We're really happy to be here. And once
Yeah.
again, as we go along with our program, we really encourage questions.
All right. So today's topic we'll be discussing depression, and we've had um, a lot of a lot of questions about depression like have been going around since COVID time, and people have different versions of what depression is. Some people use the word lightly, and some people think they know what it means, and others guess, others are more informed, and we're here to just like speak more about it. So Dr. Claiborne, why don't you tell us what is depression?
Well, that's really a good question to start with because it means different things to different people. And so when I'm sitting with a person to talk about depression, I have to ask, what do you mean by that? Because in general, there are two kind of types. One is more emotional. So sometimes people mean they have certain emotions like sadness or fear or loneliness or, really strong emotions. Other people who are depressed have like almost a feeling of emptiness or flatness or lack of feeling. And so
Mm-hmm.
there are sort of two general types. And along with that, some people also have anxiety and
Mm-hmm.
apprehension and anxiousness and worry, but other people don't. So it really is important if you're talking to somebody who says they're depressed to ask more questions and
Yeah.
what do they really mean by it. It's a good thanks for bringing that up because that's important.
And how do you differentiate the fact that maybe like how do you really know you're just sad or you're just feeling lonely and when you're truly depressed?
That's another very good question. I really appreciate your questions, Evelyn. As we know in our program now, Evelyn has great questions. So I really appreciate them. That's a really good question. In general, in psychology, any mental illness type of issue is defined by whether it interferes with your social functioning or your occupational functioning. So if you have a trait or a feeling or something like that, but it's not really interfering with your job or your relationships, then it's not as much to worry about. So I would think one thing would be if you're having a sad or lonely or frustrated or empty feeling, and it's two things. If it's lasted for a while, that would be important. And secondly, if it's interfering with your relationships, your family, your job, then those would be my two criteria.
How long is too long?
Well, for example, with grieving, when you have a loss, it's natural to do grieving. But after 6 months to a year, most grieving is much, much better. We usually
Mm,
think that, let's say we're grieving the loss of a loved one, that in the first year we grieve about 80% of that, and then the second year the other 20%. And so by the end of
mhm.
2 years, usually we're finished with grieving and we're moving on. Um, so I'd say serious sadness longer than 3 to 6 months. And
Mhm.
now if it's caused by some circumstance in your life and that circumstance is still there, well, then the depression can keep going. But if
Yeah.
whatever caused it has finished and
Mhm.
months go by and we're still sad or lonely or demotivated, or then it's worth thinking about and addressing.
Yeah. And okay, there's some people who say that you can be like active. Like you can have depression without really knowing, because like everything in your life like is normal. Like you're able to get up, you go to work, you do, I don't know whether it's called an active depression or what exactly it is called, but there are people who like they've had depression for a very long time, but they are able to keep up with the routine. So like people in their lives haven't noticed like there was anything wrong, and then like maybe all of a sudden they commit suicide or something like that, and it leaves people in their lives in shock, and they're like, I never realized that there was something wrong.
You know, one of the things that I look for that is kind of a key ingredient is whether the person can experience pleasure when they're doing things that they used to feel as pleasurable. We call this anhedonia, the inability to experience pleasure doing things that should be pleasurable. So let's say the person's performing their functions, but the question I would want to ask them is, can you experience pleasure? You can do your work. I understand that, but
Mhm.
and my hunch would be if they're depressed, they would say no. I don't experience things as pleasurable like I used to. Even though I'm functioning day to
Yeah.
day, day to day, but it's bleak. It's not. Nothing is really enjoyable.
So it will take someone who really knows you to notice whether like you still enjoy the thing that you used to enjoy. So
Hmm.
you need people who are really close to you, and they really know you, for them to realize that there's that difference in how you're doing the activity now than before.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Evelyn. Lots of times, people around us, close to us, notice things like anxiety or depression or more sooner than we do. That's
Yeah.
very, especially depression. That's right.
Mm. Yeah, because I think that is the one thing that is really shocking, especially like when we hear cases of especially suicide.
Hmm.
And and like I think one of the greatest causes of suicide is depression. And people, I think depression and anxiety, and people will be like, they usually ask afterwards like, how did I not see this? Like why did I not notice that they were okay? Like they attended events, they were there for family gatherings, they, you know, like they went to work every single day and all that. And then like, what is that one thing that really made them snap into making such a decision?
Hmm. Yeah, I think people who are really close to us or have known us for a long time will notice something subtle. Even
Mm,
now, people we work with or strangers, or they might not notice too much. But
yeah.
one thing would be a person not laughing very much, or not smiling, or not attending events that they used to attend, or um, not listening. If their friend is talking to them, but they're really not listening. They're kind of caught up in their own thoughts. There's
Mhm.
little signs like that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And what is like, what is the difference between anxiety and depression? Because I think like people mix those two up.
Hmm. Well, and sometimes people have both, so they do coexist often. Anxiety would be it's more of a physical feeling. It's definitely, well, although depression can be physical too, but with anxiety, it's an apprehension, a worry about things that may happen. Um, they call it an anticipatory emotion. If we're standing in the street and a car comes toward us and we jump out of the way, that's fear. But if
Yeah.
we're sitting inside and we're thinking later on, I'm going to cross the street, I hope a
Hmm.
car doesn't hit me. I think it might. That's anxiety. It's anticipatory. It has physical symptoms like shortness of breath or tightness in our chest or perspiring or um, So it's generally kind of a fearful experience, whereas depression is more either more sad or lonely or frustrated or more passive emotions like that. Anxiety is very alive and active, kind of like there's a fire inside. But depression
Yeah.
is more slow and subtle and unhappy and bleak and hopeless and demotivating and but sometimes we have both. I mean, we have some symptoms of depression, and but also at the same time we have anxieties about things. And so many times when people come for treatment, we have to treat both. There are
Yeah.
medicines for both.
Mhm.
um, so sometimes both need to be treated.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Yeah. And I think uh, so we Dr. Claiborne shared his article on both anxiety and depression, and I shared the depression part on the description on, if you're watching on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, and also on LinkedIn. Like there's an article on depression that he has shared, and if you read the article, there's a part that you spoke about someone with depression having irritability and anger issues. Do
Right,
you mind
right.
like expanding more on that?
Well, um, when a person is experiencing either one, they may have symptoms of the other one. And so if they go for a counseling with someone and that person asks questions, and sometimes it's important to find out which of the two things, anxiety or depression, happened first, or which one is the more important that
Yeah,
we really need to focus on. And if we focus on that, the other one will get better by itself. So sometimes that's the way we look at it. Um, Anxiety disorders are more common in the United States anyway than depression disorders. Sorry about that. But people with depression disorders very much are more likely to seek treatment. For some
yeah,
reason, people with anxiety disorders don't seek treatment very much. Only about 25% in our country, whereas with depression, probably more than 80% of people with depression seek treatment. And one thing we think happens is that celebrities and famous people and sports figures and everyone talks about depression. It's
yeah,
in the news. Uh, but anxiety disorders are not very publicized. People
yeah,
who might be celebrities or famous individuals, or if they have anxiety, they may not speak about it. So it's not as well known. And but the treatments for anxiety and depression, there are lots of very effective treatments.
yeah,
But people with depressive disorders generally, in one way or another, seek treatment, medication or therapy or something.
yeah, that is true. And like if someone has been feeling like a prolonged sadness and emptiness and they haven't gotten like a proper diagnosis, like how would you, like someone who is at home and they've experienced the symptoms that you have just explained, what are the tests that maybe they can do for themselves before they, like how do you know that you need to see a doctor,
hmm
like
That's
to
a
have
really good question too. Um, One thing I think people do is they talk to a friend or someone who knows them well, and just ask that person, do you notice any differences in me? Um, and you can talk about it, and then just ask that person, do you think this is something that I need to see a doctor? Or the main thing would be if it's really disturbing or getting in the way of your relationships or your work. If it's harming the way that you interact with your spouse or your children,
mm-hmm.
or it's harming your performance at work, those are definite signs that it needs attention.
Yeah. What I was asking earlier was, why is it that depression triggers like high irritability or anger?
Well, in some people, yes, not always, not everyone. Each person experiences these things in their own unique way. But with some people, and I think this is true more of men,
Mm-hmm.
the depression comes out as frustration and irritability and
Oh,
angry outbursts. Maybe not so much with women. Often with women, it comes out more as tearfulness and crying, or um, isolation.
mm-hmm.
Um, but yes, sometimes a clue when I have a man who comes to me for therapy, and the problem is anger and
Mm-hmm.
irritability, I immediately start asking questions about depression because that's very likely what's really going on. So
Oh,
it can be a symptom that, or like a red flag that something isn't right.
yeah. I think it's really important for people to notice because, like, most of the time, you find that I think we have a very, like, different people have a different notion of what depression is, and someone can live with it for a long time without actually asking for help. And especially like when you said that someone could be in a situation that is causing the depression and they are in that situation for a very long time without leaving,
Hmm.
so the depression is prolonged, and maybe because things seem to still function, like they're still able to get up, they're still able to go for jobs, they're still able
Hmm.
to do various things and attend activities, but they're not able to feel the pleasure of it. They're constantly sad, always crying,
Hmm.
and feeling down. And it's like they have to like put on a show, especially like in public. Oh my gosh, my life is perfect, I'm good.
Yeah.
But when they like they are dreading every minute of when they are there, but people around them, if you really don't know the person, like they will not get, like they will not notice there's something wrong.
Right. And one
Yeah.
thing that you made me think of there, Evelyn, is let's say you know somebody who's been depressed for a long time. And
Mhm.
let's say they fairly recently and suddenly seem much happier. Uh, Sometimes that's a sign of suicide that they're about to do. Sometimes if they've been so depressed for so long, they're so tired of it, and they decide to end it,
Mhm.
that actually energizes them temporarily, and they feel a little bit better. And so often we think, oh good, they're improving, but actually they've just made up their mind to end it, and that gives them a sense of relief. And the other thing to mention too is if people are depressed and they take medication, oftentimes they feel better within a few weeks. But we have to be careful because sometimes that also is a time where they might actually still go ahead with suicide because now they have the energy to do it.
Wow.
When people go into the hospital with depression and they get on medication, after a week or so, they usually feel much better. But that's often a time when, if the hospital isn't watching carefully, the person might actually commit suicide. So we usually think that when a person gets treatment for depression, there's about a
Mhm.
3 month window in which we don't really consider them over it until 3 or so months go by. And then we can relax and think that, yes, they're getting better.
Wow. I think I that has really intrigued me because uh, I think I think I'm so glad we're having this conversation because, like I said, like people keep talking about depression, but they really, really do not know. They really
Mhm.
don't know, like. what exactly it entails, and especially like what are the tell signs, especially for caregivers.
Mhm.
And I think I'm asking more of a caregiver because I have taken care of someone who has depression, and it was
Well,
really,
it is really hard to understand because, in a sense, depression is the absence of something:
yeah,
pleasure, excitement, motivation. So when we talk about depression, we're really talking about the absence of something. So that's hard. And the other problem with it that we've talked about, but is that it can just be so different in different people. Uh,
yeah.
yeah, that's puzzling.
And I think one of the things that I used to have a hard time with was the fact that, like, I'm seeing the future and I'm trying to motivate them to see the future and seeing a brighter, like tomorrow is gonna be a brighter day, it's gonna be a better day. You can try this. I know this didn't work out, but you can try this and that. But now you find like the person is so stuck in the past, so
Mhm,
stuck in like the pain of what happened before that they do not see
mhm,
anything in the future. Like for them, like they don't even live in the present, they are not even in today, they are so in the past. And every single conversation like you have with them is about, oh, this one did this to me, this happened this time. Like it's never about what is happening now, and it's never about like
mhm,
what's going to happen in the future. It's mostly about like maybe something that happened to them, like a traumatic event or something like that.
mhm. Another thing we should say probably about depression too, that there are, we mentioned there are two types. One is more the emotional and one is more empty. There are also another way of looking at it, two types. One type is caused by events, like a person's dying or a person's frustrated at work, or they've
Yeah.
lost their job, or some depressions are set off or triggered by some event. Other depressions just happen within the person physically, and it's not related to any kind of circumstance or event. It's purely biological. And so that's kind of an important distinction, because medication works better with the biological forms of depression. For example, if a person's grieving and they're sad because they're grieving,
Mhm.
medication really won't help them. But
Yeah.
if a person has that form of depression that's just genetic and biological, and it happens for no reason, and
Mhm.
it's episodic, it comes and goes randomly, that's the
Mhm.
very kind of depression that medication often really helps with, because it's physical, it's biological. And
Yeah. Uh, I think that's a very beautiful like way of explaining it, because I think I think there are people who are frustrated, like they have people in their lives who have gone through depression and have been in like taking medications for years, and they don't understand like why sometimes this doesn't work. Like, and I think that is very important for people to know that sometimes medication works, sometimes it doesn't. And I also read in your article that sometimes it's important to have both medication and therapy, because medication is short term and therapy is long term.
right, yeah, the research really shows clearly that if you have both medication and therapy together, that the outcome is much faster and much better and longer lasting. And I guess we also ought to mention that there are some people that are severely depressed, and medication or therapy are just not sufficient. And so we still use a form of electric shock therapy in a small number of people. And it
Yeah.
isn't the horrible abusive electric shock therapy that we see in the movies, that the way
Oh
things
yeah,
used to be.
that's
It's
what.
much more small doses, and but it can sometimes cause great improvement in people
Mhm.
who have not been able to improve in any other way.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's something to keep in mind. Occasionally, some people really benefit from that.
And how do you determine that depression is biological? Like it wasn't caused by anything.
The two ways are if it responds to medication, and secondly, if it comes and goes randomly and it's not associated with life events. I'm
Mm,
doing fine and I've been feeling really good, and now I'm depressed and
mhm.
I can't get out of it, and that there's no reason for it. It would be something like that that indicates it's more of a biochemical process.
Yeah. Speaking of depression, like there are certain depressions that are triggered by hormonal imbalance, especially in women. And I've read about this, like, and also experienced it for myself, like the pre and post menstrual time, and also
Uh,
there's also the postpartum depression.
right. Yes, hormones have a great effect. They're very powerful. And in men and women, different hormones have really a powerful effect on mood and motivation and it could be testosterone in men or estrogen in women, and some people are much more sensitive to that than others. Some people go through menstrual cycles and have very little mood effect, and
Yeah.
others get very much affected.
Hmm.
Same thing with taking birth control pills. Some people find that they affect their mood a lot, and many people don't find that at all. In mental health in general, we find that people are just, each person is unique, and their
Yeah.
reaction and their to medicine or life events or so you have to really understand this particular person and what they're experiencing, how they're experiencing it,
Hmm.
uh, to be able to really help them.
Yeah. I think that's really important. And I would like to invite our audience, kindly ask any questions that you have on depression, anything you'd like to ask, kindly comment below. We will see it as we are live right now.
Uh-huh.
And in case maybe like you'd like to share this episode with your friends, kindly share and invite them to come and join us, because it is important for us to know this information, because a lot of our friends are usually affected, our friends and family are affected by um, these mental health issues, and it is important for us to really, really understand them so that we can be able to help the people around us. Yeah.
Something else I just happened to think about too, when you back to your question about whether people might be suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
We would, let's say if there's a certain person you're wondering about and how they're doing, and you're a little worried about whether they might be suicidal. Two factors to also take into account are alcohol use and whether they have firearms. Because in our country, anyway, many suicides happen with men, especially when they've been drinking and they have a gun. Uh,
Wow.
uh, as a matter of fact, there are more gun related deaths in the United States from suicide than from homicide. So, more people in the United States kill themselves with guns than kill other people with guns. And
And that is
so,
so,
something to keep in mind. So if you have somebody you're worried about, you want to make sure they don't have a gun and that they're not drinking
yeah.
or using other drugs.
Speaking of which, I think even in here in Kenya, we've had many crimes of passion. Like you find like maybe a policeman, especially because as we're not allowed to have guns. Like you have to have a license to have a firearm. So you find like most gun related crimes that we experience is like from policemen, and you find like it can be like from a crime of passion then turns into suicidal, or like a person maybe going through a financial issue, or maybe something going wrong in his
Hmm.
life, and, and then he ends up like either killing the wife and the children and then shooting
Right,
himself. Yeah. So, and it's so sad, like you find that someone, unfortunately, especially like we've had so many such incidents, you find like for example, like there was a mom who killed her baby and started singing like nursery rhymes afterwards.
well, Oh,
stressed up,
mhm,
and you could tell that this is not someone who is okay. I couldn't like bear watching the video myself, but everyone spoke about it because it was
mhm,
very disturbing. And but you can tell that this is someone who is not okay at all.
mhm.
Yeah.
Some clues to suicide would be a person giving away their possessions, um,
Hmm.
or making comments that are sort of suicidal. I mean, if people do speak about it, then we have to take that seriously. And or another sign would be somebody who does an attempt, but in a very small way, like they may cut on themselves a little bit, or so it's not really a complete suicide attempt, but it's a step. And some there. Do you have that in Kenya? The occasionally people will actually mutilate themselves with a knife or cut on themselves. You have that.
I haven't had a lot of stories about it, and I think like it will be better to have like a Kenyan psychologist like come and speak about it because personally I haven't had like a lot about it. It's not that,
Uh-huh.
but I wouldn't like put it aside and say that it doesn't happen
Hmm. Hmm.
because I think one thing I've learned about people who self harm, this is someone I think they're trying to remove the inner pain and inflict on themselves like the physical pain,
Uh-huh.
and can cause
Now
maybe
that's a
that.
very good observation. I mean, some people who cut themselves like on their arm, or they actually feel better afterwards. They feel alive. They feel something, whereas
At,
before they were feeling nothing and
yeah,
very depressed. So that would be an important thing to look for.
yeah,
Because if a person's cutting on themselves, doesn't really mean they're necessarily suicidal, but it definitely means there's something wrong and that needs attention, and
yeah.
probably some form of depression. One thing about people when they begin to be suicidal is we call it tunnel vision. They begin to think of only one possible way out, and they can't
Mhm.
see other possibilities or other options or other paths to be feeling better. They begin, it becomes narrower and narrower, and until the only thing they can see is ending things. And
Yeah,
it's interesting that way. So when we're treating somebody like that, we slowly, gradually bring in options and other different ways of looking at things, and the bigger picture again, like they
yeah.
used to have before they were depressed.
Hmm. And
Have
I
you
think
ever?
that
Yeah, go
so,
ahead.
sorry, just continue.
Oh, I just wondered, Evelyn, have you ever known anybody who, whether they were suicidal or not, but where they were just so focused on something they couldn't see any other options?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen that before. And mostly it's because, and the problem with that is that they're so focused on that one vision, on how, on one outcome that,
Mhm.
and most of the time you find like that outcome is not going to work out. And that's why they're depressed about it. And without, if you're able to show them a different outcome or a different perspective of the situation, then they are able to come out of it. But most of the time you find like at that, their state of mind at that time, like they don't see any other option. They see
Uh-huh.
the, and I think it's a way of trying to control the situation, especially like a situation that you're not in control of, and you're trying to control the outcome, which most of the time for someone to be depressed because the outcome be, is not coming out the way they want it to,
Right.
is because they're trying to control the situation, and the situation is out of their control and there's nothing they can do about it, but they really really want to push, and they're struggling to push this thing to go the way they want.
And one of the most important things we can teach our children as they grow up is that is how to handle situations that are outside their control. And
Yeah,
as they grow up, if they learn gradually that how to handle things like that are out, how to recognize when something's not in my control, and then how to feel about it, how to handle it, and how to see the big picture, then they're much more likely to be happy adults. And
Yeah,
so, and kids especially, when they're growing up and like as teenagers, they may be all upset about something, and they can only see one possibility. And so sometimes we as parents gently remind them, well, there's also another way. And there's another path or a different way of looking at it. And that's very good childhood education because we
yeah,
want them, when they get to be adults, to be able to have that ability to step back and look at options and other paths that they might take, and also then to just sometimes accept when something cannot be controlled. There's a
yeah,
That's a life skill, to be able to know what you can't control and to be okay in yourself even though you can't control it. So I'm glad you brought that up, that issue of how to
yeah.
deal
And
with
it's
something that's
not bad.
outside your control.
Yeah, it's actually not bad to want something so badly, but it's important to realize that it's important to realize when it's something that is you're doing. Like if you're the one in charge of doing the activity and making it a success, then that is a possibility. But if it involves different parties and you've done the best that you can, then you have to leave the rest, because life is more than just us. And most of the time you find like the outcome actually ends up being more beneficial for us, because when it doesn't work out the way we think, you find that like the situation, you learn from the situation and you become a better person, and it actually teaches you something about yourself that you didn't know before.
Hmm. Yeah, sometimes I think as adults we have to be humble and realize that we're not powerful to change every situation. For example, we can't make everyone like us. We want
Oh
everyone to like us, but we can't really make everybody like us. And
yeah.
that's some people have a really hard time with that. Another thing you can observe is you can see people with disabilities, like in a wheelchair or crutches, and some of those people are positive and happy and not depressed, and other people in that same situation would be bitter and angry. And so a lot of it, how we adjust, is attitude. And
Yeah,
it makes a really big difference. But kids growing up really don't know that skill of how to
yeah.
change your attitude and how to get a different attitude and how to be patient and not worry so much about whether they can't control something, or so they have to learn that. And
Yeah,
we help them as parents as they grow up to learn
yeah.
things like that.
I think speaking of attitude, like there's something I wrote down in one of my classes, and I think I would like to share. Especially like when if you're experiencing like depression or depression like symptoms and you're not sure like what to do about it, like I think I have some tips here that I would like to, I'll just read them out, and then afterwards we can like discuss them. So number one, you can ask someone you respect if they ever feel disappointed, discouraged, or yeah, or maybe like if they've ever experienced failure. You can ask, like every single person has someone they look up to or they respect, or they, like that person you think that, like, like they're superhuman or they're really really strong. You can ask them such a question, and it will give you a different perspective, because every single human being has gone through failure, and you will find that they'll express themselves, and they'll give you a different perspective, and you will realize that you're not the only person going through that. Yeah. So number two, accept people for who they are. I think that points out to what Dr. Claiborne was talking about. Sometimes you're trying to control how someone will react or behave around you, and you're not in control of how anyone else, whether they like you or whether they like how you behave or how you dress or anything like. Just accept people the way they are, even with their different behavior.
And I think
Yeah,
another idea along that line is similar, is realize that sometimes people's bad behavior towards us really doesn't have anything to do with us.
yeah,
It's them. And I like that point of accepting realistically who they are.
yeah.
And yeah, that's good. I like that, Evelyn.
To control who they are, because sometimes we try to change people to become who we would like them to be, and that is something really hard to do. So I think accepting people for who they are is really, really important. Number three, um, acknowledge it to yourself. People who never feel discouraged are out of touch with themselves and the world.
Hmm.
So you have to acknowledge it to yourself that people who never feel discouraged are out of touch with themselves and the world. So it's just a normal part
Hmm.
of life. Maybe you're going through a tough season right now, and every single person goes through a tough season. And just realize that that's just part of being human. Um, Number four, let go of anger. Number five, learn to do something new. So if everything else that you were used to is not making you feel excited or any kind of pleasure, learn a new skill or try a new hobby. Maybe something else will just bring that out of you.
Hmm.
Number six, hold hold your head up, and good posture helps. So sometimes
What
these are
was the
modern.
what was the last part of that, Evelyn? Hold your head up and
Good posture helps.
oh.
Yeah, you see, like for a model, like how I'm a model, and
Uh-huh.
sometimes like one of the things we are taught is how to sit, like good posture and like keeping your head up all the time and maintaining eye contact. So sometimes I find myself going out, and sometimes I have social anxiety and I don't want to be in the area or anything, but like I think that kicks in, or maybe I'm in the streets or something, and I'll just like put my head up, walk straight, like, and then like just walk and have good posture, especially when I'm talking and sitting, or even like um taking a walk, and you will find, I don't know, it just brings out the confidence, even though you are not feeling it before, it
Mhm.
just inspires it. I don't
You
know.
know, there's a saying we have that maybe you have too: "Fake it till you bake it."
Oh yeah, we do
So in other
that.
words, act as though you would act if you were happier. You'd act that
Yeah,
way. I like that.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And I don't know whether you're the one who mentioned that sometimes just laugh. Laugh. You're not feeling like laughing, but
Hmm.
laugh, and you'll trigger your brain to think that you're happy, and then you actually start feeling happy.
Is that also is that one of your points?
No, no, no. I just
Oh,
remembered
okay.
it.
It should
Yeah,
be. I think that's a good point.
yeah. That's also a good point. Number seven, encourage someone.
Uh-huh.
Like get out of yourself and encourage someone else, someone in your life going through something.
Or
Like be,
help someone.
yeah, help someone. Like every single day you come across someone who will need help. Maybe you'll
Uh-huh.
see one person needs to cross the road. There's someone carrying heavy bags. Someone is crying. Like reach out and find out why they are. It will help you get out of your own feelings and realize that there is a whole
Hmm.
wide reality around you, that sometimes we are so focused on ourselves that we forget that there are so many people and so many human beings and other people going through worse than we are. And it actually makes you realize that your situation is not as bad as you thought it was.
Right.
Number eight, let go of things you can't control. We've talked about this. Number nine, exercise, like move. Like get up, take a walk, run, hit the gym, something. I don't know, like there are hormones that are there are happy hormones and that are released when you exercise, and you might end up triggering yourself to
Hmm.
feeling better. Number 10, establish milestone. Seeing progress encourages you.
What is you? I didn't understand that one quite. What is number 10?
Establish milestones. Like
Establish.
milestones. It's like setting goals.
Oh,
Yeah,
milestones. Yeah,
a
yeah.
milestone. So, like if you achieve small, like
Uh-huh.
have a goal and then have small milestones, and then every milestone that you achieve, acknowledge it, and it will encourage you to do more.
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Yeah.
And the
Uh,
idea there too, so they can be small.
yeah,
They
they
don't
can be
have to
small.
be goals for the future years
Yeah.
from now. Yes, yes.
Yeah. And especially if you feel so down, like you
Uh-huh.
don't feel like doing anything, just get up, make your bed, like have small milestones, like get
Hmm.
up, make your bed, brush your teeth, take a shower. Those are milestones.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
make breakfast, cook yourself a meal, take a walk. Those are milestones. You find like you'll be motivated to do more and more and more.
Yeah.
And whatever you've achieved that day, as much as it may not be much, just um, celebrate your small wins.
Hmm.
Yeah, I
Are
feel
those
it's
all? Are those all 10, or are there more?
yeah. There, I have 22. I don't know whether you should I read all of them.
Well, one other one I thought of, that list is very good, and one I thought of is go out in nature and or be around animals. You know,
Ah,
sometimes being in just in nature, it helps us get a sense of perspective. We see the trees or the mountains or the valley, and sometimes being around animals like horses or dogs or donkeys or whatever, sometimes that also gives us a sense of peace and perspective. So
yeah,
almost always with my clients, I encourage them to spend time outdoors and with animals.
yeah. Oh, own a cat. If you're not a dog person, like cats are so funny. Like if you watch cat videos and you see all the weird things that they'll do in the house, oh my gosh, you just find yourself laughing.
Hmm.
Yeah. Um, solve small challenges or complete a project. Like if you have a challenge, look break it down into small challenges and tackle small challenges at a time. Like don't look at the big problem and think that that's the end of it. Just tackle little by little, and you never know, like the small milestones will help you complete the whole project.
You know, something to mention here, if a person is feeling depressed or lost or discouraged or whatever, and they try these 10 things or most of them, and it doesn't help, that's
Mhm.
another good sign that you need treatment.
Yeah,
Because that we talked earlier about how do you know if you need extra help or extra treatment. Well, that would be one sign. You try these 10 things in good faith and you really give them a try, and maybe they even make you feel a little bit better, but not really solve the problem. Then that's a
yeah.
good sign to get extra help.
Yeah, if you find yourself like maybe getting out of the funk and feeling sorry for yourself and all that, if it helps you to get out of it, then keep doing little by little every single day, and you'll find yourself getting out of it. But if you're not able to get out of it, then that's the sign that
Hmm.
you need to seek medical help
Hmm.
or seek a psychologist or a psychiatrist. And so, like, I wanted to remind everyone that remember that it is your responsibility to, like, you have a responsibility. Like, even when you go to the therapist, you have a responsibility to try and work towards getting better. So I think it's important for everyone to try to do the best that they can, even when it doesn't work out. Like Don't see it as the end for you.
Mhm.
Seek help, and there are people out here who are willing to help you.
Yeah, the process of trying to work on things is really much more important than the outcome. So we can't
Yeah,
measure ourselves by the outcomes of our efforts, but whether we make the efforts themselves. I think that's a really good point. And if
yeah,
you are in therapy with someone, I think we mentioned this before when we talked about therapy, but it's really a team. It isn't that the therapist does something to you. You work with the therapist, each person plays your part, and the client, the customer, has to do their best, or the therapy won't be effective.
yeah.
So that's a good point. I really like your list, Evelyn. Did you have you published that anywhere? Or
I have it on my notebook, but I can write it down and I'll share
I
on
think
my
you, I
social
think
media.
that's very worth sharing with our viewers. I think that would be really, really helpful. That's a
Yeah,
very, very good list.
yeah. And I think let me read three more, and then the rest I'm going to share on my social media platforms.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. So number one, find a friend by being a friend.
Uh-huh.
Like sometimes we expect people to be there for us, and we're not willing to do the work that requires for you to be a friend to someone. So instead of having expectations on how someone should treat you, why don't you be an example of how you'd like to be treated and be a friend to someone? Like find a friend by being a friend. Like that's my statement here.
Hmm.
And then the other one is reward yourself or someone else. Like when you achieve those small milestones, like, oh my gosh, I got up early today, um I made my bed and I did this. Reward yourself with a nice breakfast or something. I don't know, like reward yourself when you do something nice. Cheer yourself on when you do something. When you just achieve something, it doesn't have to have a good outcome. The fact that you actually got up and you did it, then reward yourself at that point. And also reward someone else. When someone does something nice for you, say thank you to them and be nice to people as well. And my last one, journal. Write down how you feel. Sometimes when you write it down and you read it out loud to yourself, you will realize that it wasn't as big of a deal than you thought. And even if it was, you're not the only person in this world who's gone through it. And there are people out here who've gone through a similar situation and they have solutions on how you can deal with this situation. So, yeah, that's
And
about it.
I would add to that too that research shows really clearly that if you process something by talking about it with another person or writing it down or getting it kind of out of your head, you're much more likely to make progress than just by thinking about it. That's been shown over and over again. That just it's not because the other person gives you advice. It's just seeing yourself write it down or hearing yourself verbalize it helps wrap your mind around it and come to a better place than if you just thought about it internally. That's very important.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's actually true. Like sometimes I find myself finding solutions to problems that I had by expressing myself to someone that I care about. Like maybe I went through something bad and I am venting. Okay, I call it venting. Like I don't even want them to give me a solution. I just wanted to vent about the
Yes.
situation.
Yes.
Sometimes I actually at that moment
And
that
actually, when you're
it will.
talking with somebody about this, I think it's good to tell them what you want. If you want venting, just say that I just really need to vent. Or if you actually are looking for ideas or solution, say that I'm really looking, I want to know what you think. So you can tell, because otherwise the listener doesn't know. I mean, that you may be wanting to vent, but the listener, especially if it's a man, thinks you want solutions. And so,
Yeah.
you always tell, here's what I think I need from you. Yeah, that's a good
Mhm.
point.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this has been an amazing show. Dr. Claiborne, is there anything else that you'd like to add about
Well,
depression?
two things. I really, really think you've got some great information there, Evelyn, that you should publish in some way, put that in writing for others. And then the other thing we wanted to talk about is our next program. We're thinking of doing
Yeah.
it on the criminal mind and how
Oh,
criminals think that is different from the way most of us think. So I
that's
think,
gonna be in.
yeah, that'll be very interesting. I
Yeah,
will
I'm looking
represent.
forward to.
I'll represent the normal person, and Evelyn can represent the criminal person. Just kidding.
Do I look like a criminal?
Yeah.
But to be honest, most criminals, like, you can't tell a criminal by how they look. Sometimes some of them will surprise you.
In the history of psychology, there was a time where people have made efforts to define criminals by the size of or shape of their head, or how they look, um, or their body build. There have been efforts to just use physical characteristics to predict who is a criminal and who isn't. But none, of course, none of that resulted in anything. But yeah, people have thought of that for thousands of years. It just
Wow.
didn't. They didn't have psychology, so they did the best they could, and they thought maybe physical characteristics are a clue. Yeah. Anyway, yes. So
Wow.
we'll talk about the
I'm
criminal mind.
I'm so looking
Yeah.
this.
If anybody has questions, even in advance, things you wish we hope we cover
Yeah,
about criminal mind, let us know.
yeah. That is going to be very interesting, and I'm looking forward to that conversation. If you
Uh,
have any questions, like, I know there's so many people here who like to watch detective movies and murder series, and you want to understand, like, what led to this person thinking like this,
uh,
and why are they happy, and why are they apathetic about certain things. And we're going to have that discussion right here next week. And this has been Mind to Mind by
right.
Evelyn and Dr. Claiborne. And this is the Holistic Wellbeing by Evelyn Jerry. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for sharing.
Thank
Keep
you.
sharing this video. It remains online, so don't think that you've lost it just because you didn't join us early enough. You can start watching from the beginning. Thank you for joining us. I want to wish you a lovely, lovely night. Bye.
Yes. And we will see you next time. Thank you.